As you can see, clearly not the star. It's Millie. Mila? Mila, okay. She's apparently a frequent conference goer. You should catch up with her whenever you have time. Okay, for those of you who can, please come in front. It'll be easier for our voices. For those of you who want to continue having this space between the stage and us, I understand, because some of us are doing many things at the same time. Okay, this is going to be tricky because I've never had a panel where I have two people who basically have almost the same first name and also do very similar things in life. Please welcome Marina. She's the co-founder and executive director of European Crypto Initiative. Welcome. And we have, so that was Marina, and this is Mariana. Please welcome Mariana De La Roque. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can pronounce it
okay, whatever I can, yeah. So there you go. Well, hello. I'm loving this, by the way. I love dogs. This is the best panel I've ever done in my life before I started. I'm in love. Okay, so we were supposed to have one more person who couldn't make it, unfortunately, at the last minute, which happens. So this is about MiCA and regulatory development. So we're going to focus on what's happening with MiCA, when is implementation, how does MiCA fit into the world's blueprint of regulations, all of that. And because we are only two panelists, I'm not going to throw questions to you based on what your individual expertise you might think is. I'll just throw it, and any one of you can pick it up. You have one mic to share. Just try to hold the mic like this because we got a video recording, all right? We're just trying to make sure that people watching online in the future or now can actually hear us. Okay. I want to just first talk about this thing that we see. I'm a journalist with CoinDesk. We cover regulation. The focus is really trying to get a sense of which country is regulating how and how fast. And MiCA has a positive gloss around it, which is, oh my God, 27 nations came together and said we got a regulation for crypto. And the rest of the world is still confused about whether they even want regulation. For example, G20 countries say, we want consensus, but the G7 says we want stablecoin regulations. The G20 says we don't want stablecoin regulations because it hurts our monetary sovereignty potentially. So just remove the positive gloss for us, because implementation hasn't happened. The framework is there right now. What do you see MiCA's true value to the global regulatory framework?
You want to start? I can start. It's the first one. I know that people in Brussels, they're really, really proud about that. So it is a first comprehensive crypto assets regulation. I think it is also very sober in how it regulates token issuance. It's very lean. If you think about any type of projects that would like to issue a token, it is pretty, again, lean. Of course, there's a white paper that you need to write in case you would like to issue, and there's a lot of information there that you would need to basically notify to the authority, but there's only the notification part. The other part is the crypto assets regulation that is focused on basically the services. This part, I think it's also very well regulated because the focus was really the consumer. So if the consumer is going to have enough, I would say, safety in order to use this crypto asset service providers. We know there were really bad stories in the past, so the reason is we need to kind of control what's going on with crypto asset service providers. The tricky part might be the stablecoin part. This is also, as you mentioned, the G7, G20 discussion. We have regulated stablecoins. There are two types of stablecoin. One that is the e-money token that is basically the value is presented in one of the fiat currencies, and there's the asset reference token that is something similar, but the value is presented in a mix of different currencies and crypto assets or different crypto assets or even gold. So in a way, a bunch of different assets. And this is really, really tricky, also because in less than 40 days, this part of MiCA is going to be applicable. And we already think and have quite a, I would say, certainty that the non-regulated stablecoins, the ones that are not asking for a license, they will be delisted from crypto asset service providers, so from exchanges. And we'll have only the one that are regulated.
Well, it's 40 days, right?
Less than 40 days. I think it's 35 days or something.
So, but what's your sense of, like, how many of these so-called unregulated currently stablecoins are looking for compliance, given we're so close now? How many of them actually?
I think that I know 4. but 2 of them are not listed yet on centralized exchanges. So that's what we know of. Happy to hear if you know more about others as well. But I think overall, as you said, is good. We do have certainty right now. We do have a unified market to a certain point. We'll discuss later, if there are any tricky parts as well. And I think that compared to what we have seen, some proposals, let's say in the US or somewhere else, it is still manageable. Especially the parts, again, the token issuance and crypto as a service providers. But the stable coins, to my opinion, are a little bit trickier.
All right. My next question is just about the gaps that are there in MiCA. And the reason I ask about this, because what's happening is yesterday, so I don't know how many people are reading the news that CoinDesk provides. Please do read it. It's incredibly important. Yesterday, Jesse Hamilton, Nikhilesh Dey, colleagues of mine, wrote an article about how the US House of Representatives have passed a bill. Now, it's a landmark bill in many ways because, well, nobody thought that in an election year, the US, any house, the Senate or the House of Representatives, would actually come together and pass a bill. Right? They have. It may not pass in the Senate, but it's a huge step forward. At the same time, you're expecting Ether ETFs to come into play. They will get regularized. That's what Bloomberg analysts and others have actually said. Ether ETF and spot Bitcoin Ether ETFs, they're getting approved. They've already got approved in Hong Kong. There is forward movement in policy. But what's happening is that given MiCA's legislation framework happened, or regulation framework happened a few months back, and implementation is around the corner, so nothing is likely to change, the updated regulatory developments in other parts of the world are perhaps more updated than MiCA in a way. So I just want to, in that context, the gaps of MiCA.
I mean, the thing is that you need to understand context, right? Like you said that it was the first one. I have a lot of doubt about MiCA being the first regulatory framework, because I saw someone in Japan that was similar somehow, but it's just one state, so it's really easy and faster than if you are trying to actually produce a bill in the European Union, just because of the whole procedures that we have. And what is really important to understand is that in the moment that MiCA started to be discussed, and we can keep talking about this, but it will make any change, right? We have the situation with Libra. So some of the things that we are seeing that went into MiCA are answers to the context in which MiCA was discussed as well. One of the jokes that I always make is I'm really happy that this was done before FTX, because I don't know what else will have gone into MiCA, right? But it still is a framework. So now it comes to the national authorities to start solving some of those things, right? Because as you presented, it is a framework, but it really will come to the national authorities on how they define some of those topics, and there are certain areas that are really open for interpretation, right? We are right now running some MiCA roundtables around Europe in 13, actually 12 countries, in 13 roundtables in 12 countries, and we are trying to understand what are the main challenges.
Sorry, I just want to say that again, 13 roundtables in 12 countries that they are conducting, which is kind of crazy, I think. And so they really are part of the discussion at the core. Yeah.
But these roundtables are not education sessions, are actually talking to the industry to try to identify what are the main challenges that they are seeing when implementing MiCA. Of course, there is a lot of questions about the stable coins, but the part on the stable coins, I think that is not a surprise. We already know what was going to happen. I think that some of the issues of stable coins, they knew that certain business models were not going to work in Europe after MiCA, and this is not a surprise. But there are certain things that we still don't know how they're going to play, and this is really coming to the national authorities. So one of them, I think that the two that everyone is hearing right now is what is going to happen with the NFTs, and we have really interesting discussions about what is going to be considered a collection, what are the criteria that national authorities will need to understand in order to just define the uniqueness of the NFT, the utility, if all of these topics needs to come with a guidelines.
But don't you think you're moving ahead, because NFTs is MiCA 2.0 that we're thinking?
No, NFTs are in MiCA. If they're part of a collection, they're going to be there, but how do you know right now if they are not or not? And I don't think that there's going to be MiCA 2.0. I don't know about you, but DeFi is also there, and everyone is no, DeFi is not there, but they say fully decentralized. But at this point, and this is one of my concerns, we as an industry don't know what truly decentralized is. There has been some conversations about it, that if it's just like at the technology level, if it's at the governance level, if it's like a token concentration level, like what is it that it is? And what is going to happen is that if they go to court, like, and they kind of like are saying like they're not part of MiCA or not need to be compliant with MiCA because they are like DeFi, a judge is going to say, like, I'm really sorry, but I don't think that you are fully decentralized, if I'm truly decentralized, and they're going to fail.
But the judge could say the opposite too.
The judge can say the opposite too, and it will be an amazing precedent for the whole industry. I really, I don't think that, like, especially at the CASP level, so like the service providers can argue. Like token issues are another different thing. Like at the level of the platforms, I don't know. And on this, there are also like really interesting discussions about solicitation, about if like the website where you have like the DeFi application is actually like a centralized point, and all of these like nitty-gritty details are going to be like discussed at the national authorities. So EMTs, I think that is one of the biggest one, because there is they can be understood like in two parts of MiCA, like different, where like EMTs, so e-money tokens, will need to be issued by a financial institution, and they will have the same treatment as e-money, which is completely separate. It's another directive. And in another part of MiCA, it said that it might be understood. So it is or it might be. Like those are like two completely interpretation, and it will come to the national authorities. Then you have grandfathering. Then you have there is like many gaps.
That's what I want both of you to break down for us and do this collectively. Just because you're dealing with trying to remember how 27 different authorities are basically going to implement, all right? Now, there are few factors that we need to think about. One is interpretation of languages. So there's MiCA, and then how every nation will interpret it, right? When they actually bring it into their legal system. And they got to do that in most cases, at least as I understand, in terms of bringing it into legislation before December, all right? And when they do that, there will be a language of MiCA, and then there'll be their nation's language. And there'll be something lost in translation or interpreted differently, all right, particularly. So that will then be part of their rule, and that'll be implemented slightly differently from another nation. So there will be interpretation difference, implementation difference. How is it that folks who are, did you have a question?
They don't have to implement it, right? They still just pay a fine, and that's what a lot of do it.
So let's answer that question first, yeah.
So that is the case with the directives, which is you need to implement it in the member state, and you need to basically have a law that is also a substantial law, because you have different things that you can choose within basically the directive. MiCA is a regulation, which means it's directly applicable. As you said, you could pay a fine for not implementing, because there are some details that the member states can still choose. For example, what is the implementation period? It can be long, up to 18 months, or what are the fines, stuff like that, because of course we have different economic situation. So that's a very, very important question and topic. Thank you for asking. And that's also why we were kind of relieved when we knew that MiCA is a regulation, because they were like, okay, now it's really nice. We will have the whole European Union as one market, and then whoever wants to access the whole European Union, we will have this one rule, and it will be all sorted out. The challenge, besides everything that you mentioned, which is really, really important, is that right now we are seeing all the member states finalizing those internal laws and finalizing the period. The second, again, the fines, etc. And they also do decide who is the responsible national competent authority. In some countries, you wouldn't believe that, but they only have the central bank that is responsible for everything. And then in some countries, they do have two different authorities that are responsible for, one for banking, for basically more on the money side, and the other one more on the financial side. So we are really different in here. As you know, even before MiCA, some of the member states, they did have regulation. So I would say that these authorities, they are really knowledgeable. They know what's coming. They are very detailed in looking into what is written in MiCA, how it was different before. Some of them might also have less capacity, because there are small authorities that have maybe 50 people, even less, and there's one person.
I just want to pause you there.
Yeah.
See, what you're doing is, you're speaking from the perspective of a regulator, because you interact with regulators a lot all the time, and you're trying to educate them I know that they all hate the term education, by the way, but you're trying to
Inform-
make them more
inform them.
understand, ally with them in a way of how to move forward. Here's the thing. The folks here and the folks who are interested in perhaps listening to this later, they're going to be concerned with, okay, if I'm a crypto company, how do I regulate myself, get into compliance, when the framework that is so-called sorted is actually going to be enacted and implemented differently. And I don't know which jurisdiction to kind of start in.
I wouldn't say so strictly that it will be implemented differently.
Okay.
I would say that it will be implemented in the same exact way. The only difference is this period. But the interpretation of the people that sit there, and depending on how much experience they had in the past, how much time they have right now to work on all these issues, will be different. And this is why companies.
How do you track it?
Exactly. Companies are now talking to them. You choose 10 of them, 5 of them, you talk to them, you see what they think about, I don't know, staking, what they think about DeFi, what is an NFT, and then you see where you are and you choose your jurisdiction.
I think that like what he's asking is like something different. Like what you need to know if you are a company is like, right now you need to know if you are under MiCA or no. And MiCA has like certain services, and these are the ones that are going to determine if you will need a MiCA license. Not all the MiCA licenses are going to be the same. Like if you are a crypto as a service provider, it's completely different. If you are probably like an issuer, or you are an advisor, or like all of these things, I think that's Article 4. You can check it out there, and then you can assess if you are going to need a MiCA license or not. When in doubt, consult with us. But the thing that you also need to understand is like, where do you want to operate? And this is really important. Because if you're going to operate in Germany, well, I'm so sorry for you, like you will need to go to BaFin. There's no more options, right? But if you are like in Germany, you are in Austria, you are in Croatia, you want to go to Greece, you need to inform one of them that you want to apply for the license. And I think that this is
within a
timeline.
Within the timeline also. You need to tell them within a timeline.
Yes, but like you can always like passport after. You can extend like this. This is like really important, and this is actually the benefit of MiCA. Before, if you needed a BASP license to operate here, or like you needed to ask permission to every member state for a license. So you needed to do this process over and over and over. Now you just go to one of them, pick your favorite, go to there, and then you inform them.
How do you pick your favorite?
It will really depend on what you do, and it really depends on the services like that you are going to offer. As more services as you have, more complex your process is going to be, because they will review it.
Okay, I'm going to make this more fun. So I used to cover elections. India is going through an election. Trust me when I say this. I have traveled the length and breadth of the country. I was there on January 6th at the US Capitol, just after Joe Biden won the presidency, but some Trump supporters felt that he had not. There's some election happening soon in the EU, I believe, right? And note my sarcasm when I say that the MPs that you have been talking to perhaps will change, as we discussed last night. You
Yeah, but
informed
like
me.
the MPs has nothing to do with like, this is like national authorities,
I know,
right?
but
This
going
is the BaFin
forward,
people.
going forward, when you have to kind of make them align with the new developments that take place with regulations, anything new that comes in, how will that change in an election atmosphere? This is a super election year.
I think that that's like I will say that it's a little bit separate, because like MiCA is already there, and now is the time of the national authorities to actually make them happen. So the interest actually like has a little bit like move away, right? So like what is going to be interesting for them people, like they're always talking about innovation. So I think that like now the interest is moving to everything that is connected to AI, and also like everything that is tokenization, like tokenization of IP rights, tokenization of real estate. All of these are the topics that they're interested in understanding how they are like going to do we even need a regulation. And like the things that like also like are like coming kind of like after MiCA as well is like what is going to happen with the NFTs, that there was a study planned, but there was like some like situations with members of the parliament at the time, so that would go frozen. And then also like what's going to happen with DeFi. All of these are like open conversations. I think that is going to be really interesting to see what is the new generation that will come, or like if they will remain, some of them, because like most of the people that we were discussing back in the days in the commission and the parliament, they're also not there. Like some of them has moved. So you always need to just like be understanding like who is actually like driving this process and how to approach them and like stay in contact with them. So
And
that's different.
how much is Berlin or Germany, serious about? So let me rephrase this, because it's like when Washington D.C. moves on something, the rest of the world moves on something, right? But Berlin and Germany may or may not move on certain aspects of MiCA or whatever. When they move, they're a first mover, but they're also like the signaler of what's going to happen for the rest of the EU.
On that note, like maybe it might be that is the case, but also like France is always like pushing to get like there. Like so, when you were talking about like the different national member states, like in the reaction to MiCA, I think that like some of them are really interested in like bringing the companies and like getting the licenses, and that's the case of, for example, like we have like seen like Germany starting to do that, like Austria super active, like with the AMF in France. What is the name of the other ones? Well, I forgot.
AML you're talking about?
No. Just like the Austrians are really active. Then you have the French that are like really interested in like trying to just like put their hands in like smart contracts and like DeFi and all of these things. So you are like seeing, and then at the same time like FMI, it was Austria, and then you have like for example like the Belgians, it doesn't seem that they really want to bring the license into Belgium, right? So everyone is just like having like different approach. Croatia already had like I don't know how many, and I don't know how many of those are going to be moved like after MiCA, right? So like all of these are going to change. When it comes to Germany, I think that there was like one part of MiCA that said that like for the grandfathering period, that if your legislation, if for those that already have like a legislation, if it's already stricter than MiCA, then you can actually like have certain exceptions. The only legislation that I know that was tougher than MiCA, it was the German one. And they are the ones that said like, no grandfathering. So they're not even taking the exceptions. But like I know like other member states are taking their own approach and they're doing grandfathering. So I think that like comparing the US with the approach here is like not really a right comparison.
So Coindesk actually did an article, my colleague Sandali did an article about how each of the 27 nations within the EU jurisdictions are approaching the implementation. A lot of them actually did not respond to our request for comment. Some of them did. We got a good idea in that article. You can actually go ahead and read that. You know, we were talking earlier and you wanted to talk about a few things and throw light on this. Crypto assets in terms of implementation versus financial instruments. The centralization, centralized creation of MiCA in Brussels, but the decentralized supervision as we just talked about. White paper requirements. Where are the problems? Where are the gaps? Where does somebody in this audience need to be concerned about?
So we have some clarity under MiCA, which is a really long document, and yeah, if you're bored, you can read it, but maybe I don't recommend that. There is a secondary technical process that is happening right now within ESMA, the European Securities Market Authority, and they are issuing standards and guidance, and those are the interesting things. So if you are issuing tokens, if you're planning on issuing tokens, look into the standards for that. If you're issuing e-money tokens, there's a lot of rules there as well. And the two recent that Mariana also mentioned, one of them was what is the definition of a crypto asset versus what is a financial instrument. There have been a debate for years in the US, so utility versus security. We thought we have solved this issue within MiCA, but we see now that there's still a lot of open questions. Under the guidance that we have seen in ESMA and also talking to national competent authorities as well, we do understand that they might do this test in a very strict way. So more utility tokens, as we call them, could be financial instruments or financial product that we first thought of. We have found a document in 2019. ESMA basically wrote in a piece there that 10 to 30% of all the tokens issued in ICOs might be financial instruments or securities, but not more. I think that in this case, maybe it will happen that they have a much stricter, again, test. And that is very concerning because this is basically the core of MiCA, it's the core of our industry as well. And going around, talking to them, talking to national competent authorities in each member state is now important. Brussels is passé right now. So MiCA is done. There was like a centralized, as we discussed, way of kind of discussing and agreeing on MiCA. There was a political agreement. But then, as you mentioned, the Parliament, the Commission, the Council, they are not deciding on the implementation. They're not deciding if they will give you the stamp at the end of the day and the license.
This is an example of why there is this optic out there that the EU should get a pat on its back for getting MiCA out there. Because it didn't solve these problems, but it got this regulation out there. Now, I'll give you an example. Yesterday's crypto bill that was passed in the US has made the CFTC the regulatory authority for crypto assets, right? Which is an argument that has been there in the US forever, that the SEC or the CFTC, which should control this asset. And the SEC came out with a statement immediately saying that this bill is all, it's not right. So the US hasn't solved that problem. The EU, which is seen as great framework, they've got it right, they've got something going, hasn't got it right. So but somewhere should we just tell everyone that the problem here is that it is a difficult question to answer, and when you're innovating, when you're building, when you're going and starting a crypto company, just you should be aware of what's happening, but you got to just keep believing that it'll all work out in the end. Is that what the approach should be?
I think Europe did a great job, and within the framework that it had, we cannot change our in a way constitutional document that we have in the EU, and there is an agreement on how capital markets work. There's not an ECC in Europe, but all the national competent authorities, they do have their own basically rights, and also member states do decide on some things in the European Union. So that's the best we could do. Of course, there's a discussion of a more unified and aligned capital markets union. We have seen that now, especially before the elections, and maybe we can see some changes in the next mandate, but that would require a much more, I would say, almost constitutional changes in the EU.
Let him
because
answer.
I also think that you keep comparing with the US, and I think that that's like a huge mistake. Because there are different frameworks, different contexts, different realities. Like the SEC you were asking, I think that you have seen all of this, but it's the one that for non-lawyers, he is just going around and taking different companies and then just claiming that they are actually a security and that they didn't have a licenses for this. And this is what we call actually regulation by enforcement. They don't have rule, they just take them to court, and then they decide in court, and then you have different
Sorry, can I just push back against that?
SEC, I understood ECC.
Yeah, no, but the SEC pushes back against this argument, says this is not regulation by enforcement. They have been mandated by the Congress's traditional rules in financial...
one is the thing that they say, the other thing is what they do. And I personally, and I'm not this is just me, Mariana, I think that this regulation by enforcement because they're pickpocketing the people and taking them to court, and then making the same argument over and over and over, and then you have now a precedent there. I don't think that you can compare with that because now, Europe is just trying to actually generate an environment where also you're going to push forward adoption. Because what is MiCA is about is the protection of the consumer. So what they wanted to do, and also facilitate the things to enter into Europe, because enter into Europe before required to get 27 license. That was massive effort. If you wanted to operate in your small company, you cannot do it. You cannot do it. Period. Okay. Now you just go to one, and it's just completely unified. You enter to Europe by only knocking one door, and then you got it.
I concede. I concede that the environment has been created. Okay, that's fair. Now, just to make the point that was made by India as the president of the G20 last year. Now, it's important to remember that what was going on in the world of crypto was that the Financial Stability Board was kind of the leader in terms of shaping the regulation. All stakeholders are usually involved, but in writing that paper that the whole world, or particularly the major economies, would agree on, the Financial Stability Board was the leader in that. All right? Roundtables with governments were happening all the time. Then what happened, India as a leader of the global south, they said, excuse me, the Financial Stability Board has a closer relationship with the West, particularly the US and EU. So what about the rest of the world? We're going to bring in the IMF. The IMF constantly deals with countries that need support financially. All right, so the IMF and FSB came together because India said we want the IMF to be part of the global consensus that is going to make crypto regulation, right? Now you're saying don't compare it to the US, but at the end of the day, everyone talks about crypto as a cross-border thing that everyone has to kind of have a rule for. Therefore, it will be secure. Okay, so everyone has to have the same rules, otherwise we're going to be in a problem. Because if somebody has one rule and the other one has another rule, well that's one argument, right? Obviously there are details in that, we can get to that. So, and then India says, we will not come up with a regulation, and we will want, their words are global consensus. Everyone has to agree, right? So IMF and FSB come up with a paper that they call synthesis paper. Synthesis paper is meant to say that this is the broad framework that we'll all work with. Now my question to you is that the EU has come up with the framework, and it is in the process of implementing that. Great, positive news. But at the end of the day, if its implementation, and it's signaled that its implementation will be slightly different at least, how is it that you're going to have the whole world, particularly Asia, come together with that regulation so that we can have that global consensus?
I mean, like the thing there is, I think that like there are like certain like principles that you need to differentiate, right? Like when you look at like the international market, not only look at like crypto, there's not one unified thing. There are like principles, and that's what it guides what like we interact with each other, right? Like this is like is probably the same direction that is going to go. Now, when you are not in Europe, we still like have like all the principles of reverse solicitation, which is like if you are outside of Europe.
What did you say? Reverse what?
Reverse solicitation. So
solicitation.
what will happen like if you are a company that is not in Europe, but you are targeting European consumers? Again, MiCA is all about consumer protection, at least as I see it. So all of those rules are already there. No one is forced to just like take MiCA and copy and paste. But if you want to touch Europe, you want to target consumers here, you're gonna be involved with MiCA, whether you want it or not, because we have the principles of reverse solicitation. How they gonna enforce that? That's actually an interesting question that I always have, and it's like how this is going to be enforced, or if there are gonna be some penalties, but if the companies are not in Europe, like who is going to enforce that penalty? What I think that is interesting is like what we call like actually like the Brussels effect, which is basically that it is a landmark, as you said. Yeah. And what will happen is like, or like the natural part is that like other countries are going to start to look at what is actually the implementation of MiCA. So not the framework that we have right now, but in like 2-3 years, actually how MiCA is impacting the market and the companies and the people that is actually working from here, and if that works or not, and it will get adjusted. And MiCA also have some review process, right? So it's not that this it is, and then with this we'll leave it like the
update.
Bible.
It will update.
No, it will be reviewed, right?
It will be
so
reviewed,
this will just like, it's like what happened with like the GDPR. GDPR also was a landmark, like first privacy policy, like also in Europe. The funny thing is that like when you wanted to enforce it, like we also faced some problems there. Like there was not like really enforcement. And also like if you look at blockchain and like data privacy in blockchain, like technically everything is in violation of GDPR and the right to be forgotten. How they are going to do that? But no, I don't know. We will review it. So now what is actually coming is the review of the GDPR.
Marina, I want to see whether you answer this differently. The same question that I had.
Just really briefly, I wanted to mention IOSCO as well, the International Organization of Securities.
Yes.
So
BIS also.
Yeah, you have played a really important role last year in India, and this year I think is Brazil that is.
Yes, Brazil is there. But so Brazil hasn't made crypto a priority. India did.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And because in a way the international organizations also kind of forgot about crypto and DeFi this year as well, except what they ask, as you said, in the developing world, the stablecoins should be regulated. That was something that was also very.
They're actually not asking that stablecoins should be regulated. They're saying we don't want stablecoins.
We don't want them at all.
At all. Okay. And the G7, EU, and a lot of the other countries.
How is this fair?
How is this fair? Because our monetary system is a bit more volatile than yours, because you have the EU and the dollar everywhere, and we're good. It's not going to get shaken up when crypto rises. But with India, for example, or the global south, they'll be like, hey, excuse me, if crypto comes, we can't monitor our sovereignty, financial independence.
It is important what's happening on the international level, and that's also why we responded to the IOSCO crypto assets report and the DeFi report together with an Indian association, a Singaporean one, a Canadian one. So we were basically looking into, okay, what does this mean globally for all of us together? And it was a very interesting exercise because in this case, we have seen how far we have come from Europe. And then some of the principles, as you mentioned, we're kind of agreeing within the group. They have agreed on some of the main principles that MiCA is also led by. So it is important also, FATF, when it comes to anti-money laundering, not only financial regulation. And as was mentioned today, crypto assets is not number one anymore. It's AI, even internationally. So we'll see how it will develop, but having some frameworks.
I want to push back on that. I've heard this so often that I'm getting tired of it. We will see how it will develop with AI and crypto. But we won't see because people don't have a clue. Like, if AI regulation is going to come up right now, for example, in the US, and remember, let's understand, this is a dollarized world, right? There's a dominant currency out there, a dollarized world. The US comes up with AI regulation that will follow, that will impact every other regulation in terms of updates, reviews, etc. So in that context, I mean that when there are startups and there are companies that are coming up at the intersection of AI and blockchain or crypto, how will this actually play out? Because we don't have a clue right now.
So,
I mean, like we didn't mention this, but together, like our organizations have a manifesto, and like this is one of the principles, right? Like we need to stop like looking at technology in silos. So one of the things that like I find interesting is just like, yeah, interest is moving to AI, like funding is moving to AI, regulation is just like the regulatory like part, and like the authorities interested in there. But at the end, you cannot look at these things like in silos because all of them work together, right? So if you want to actually like mitigate some of the risks that were identified on the AI Act, which are already there, like, right? Like the AI Act, what it's doing is creating like a ranking system of like the risks that you are going to generate with like certain applications, and depending of the risk in which, and the risk category that you are, you will need to comply with certain requirements, or you are completely banned if that is like, I don't know, like social scoring, like the one that Israel deployed in Palestine, completely forbidden under the AI Act. So what is going to happen to implement all of this? Like you will need to have like certain infrastructure working in parallel with the AI application that will help you to implement like all of those processes when it comes to IP rights, when it comes to data ownership, and for that is like perfect for the qualities of blockchain, right? So I think that like what is like missing here is like see how holistically all of these technologies play together in a way that like blockchain, not only the financial applications, and like that is what like we have been discussing like mostly here, but actually like the infrastructure of blockchain and like the qualities of blockchain itself are going to play together with all the rest of the technologies that are coming.
Okay, I'll give you guys closing comments. I'm going to take 2 minutes extra. Now, we as journalists, we do our reporting. We talk to a number of people. There's some stuff that we can report, some stuff we can't report because we either don't have somebody saying it on record or proof. What we are also hearing is that ESG is going to play an important role going into MiCA's implementation. We're hearing murmurs that there are concerns within the crypto industry that the way the implementation is going to take place is going to actually stifle crypto. The requirements with carbon credits is, and generally that entire the portrait of ESG, that's going to be complicated to comply with. And what politicians are doing is, well, they're basically, and this is very oversimplified, so I beg my pardon, it's oversimplified because what they're saying is that effectively, we understand we can't stop crypto, but we want to stall it. We want to keep it in check. And now that we've got MiCA going, we don't know how much we'll be able to keep it in check. We'll see how it's implemented. So we've got to come up with a new way, and that new way is ESG, because that aligns with everyone in the world saying there's something known as climate, and we've got to be careful of that. There's proof of stake, there's proof of work, so we've got to figure that space out. What are you hearing about that? And please be on the record.
I'm always on the record, like as Mariana. When I talk, I just like me.
Okay, then
not
be
the
off the
companies that I represent. I will always say what I think. And I've been actually like working and like leading the sustainability and social impact efforts for INADPA for the past 5 years or something like that. So this is one topic that we have been like discussing quite a lot. We still don't know what exactly the criteria are going to be, because there is a tender right now that was allocated last week to a consortium that has been already working on this. They are working already with like some of the layer ones to understand the energy consumption, and they're like already like having a methodology. And this is the one, this is the consortium that is going to implement that methodology that is going to be assessed. And they are also advocating really hard for actually like looking at the positive subs, right? Like because you have like, you were talking about carbon credits, but at the same time, like what do you do with the carbon credits? Companies that are like heavily contaminating just buy the carbon credits to just like compensate like their emissions, right? But you have like also like really interesting projects in the blockchain space that are creating financial inclusion, that are actually like preventing greenwashing in the carbon credits markets, and all of these things. And these are also like positive impacts that will need to be like equalized when you are like actually like measuring the impact of blockchain, especially when talking about ESGs, because ESG is not just climate also, right? So all of these parts are going to be there, and they also want to do like an assessment of actually how much the companies can provide in terms of the information, consider that there is distribution in like how blockchain works, but also like how much it can be enforced on this matter.
But we still don't know.
No, we don't know.
Okay.
That's in
Marina,
fact.
any other thoughts?
Yes, so I think most of our audience are builders, and what I'm going to say is if you want to issue a token, you will need to write a white paper and send it to the national competent authorities. Pretty easy and pretty lean, so you will be able to do that.
Does everyone know what a national competent authority is?
It's BaFin, CONSOB, IMF, yeah. So FMI. The other thing, if you are an exchange or custodial, etc., you will need to have a license. If you are issuing a stablecoin or want to work in a stablecoin, you will need a license as well. That part is becoming applicable very soon. So if you don't have one, you will be delisted from exchanges. The other part is very similarly to how it happened in the past with MiFID, and we've seen a lot of consolidation at the time, a lot of mergers, acquisitions, etc. This will be the time in the year in Europe that will happen the same. The banks, institutions, they're looking into startups. If you want to sell, talk to them. If you want to continue grow, maybe buy some entities that have a license already if you need one. But it will be really a big market of discussions, consolidations. And from now on, especially the ones that are regulated under MiCA, so crypto as a service providers, they will become a part of a financial system. So all the other rules on data, on DORA, like the technical issues, security, etc., they will all apply to them, and in a way, de facto, they will become a part of a financial instrument. We have never seen something like this before. This industry have been growing because of the open source, because of the open way of how we could innovate, and this will change for sure. So this is not saying that MiCA was bad. I think that this is a result of any regulation, if it could be bad or good or whatever. It's being something that never happened before, and it will happen right now. So big changes for anyone that will want to access the European Union market.
All right.
It's not for only companies, but really anyone
Yes.
for the market.
Just 2 minutes for questions. We are completely out of time. One question? Way over time. So maybe you can catch her or them. So from the three panelists, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.